All right, let's journey back in time, way back to ancient India. We're going to tackle a really big question. How did we get from these small, scattered communities to massive, powerful empires? We're going to uncover the story of how the very first kings, the first states, and these incredibly complex societies even came to be.
I mean, think about it for a second. Kings, they haven't always been around. So where did the first ones come from? It sounds like a simple question, but the answer is just fascinating. Before there were kings, society was organized in a totally different way. So how does someone go from just being, a respected person in their community to becoming a ruler over thousands, holding the power of life and death? Well, that's the exact story we're going to unpack.
Okay, so the whole story really kicks off with this massive, radical shift in what it even meant to be a leader. Power wasn't just about being the strongest warrior or the wisest elder anymore. No, it became something else, something much more formal, something you could actually create, show off, and even pass down to your kids.
So let's really look at the difference here, because it's huge. On one hand, you had the early leaders of the jana, that just means the people. These guys were basically picked for their skills. They lived among everyone else, no fancy palaces, no permanent armies. But then, about 3,000 years ago, a totally new kind of ruler shows up, the Raja. And these new kings, they weren't chosen, not at all. They built their power by performing these huge, elaborate sacrificial rituals called yagnas. You might have heard of the famous horse sacrifice. It was all about showing they had divine favor, claiming this special status that put them way, way above everybody else.
Now, this new political setup, it didn't just pop up out of nowhere. To prop up this brand new kind of kingship, society itself had to be completely re-engineered. A whole new social blueprint was drawn up, and it was called the Varna system. So the priests, or Brahmins, the very people who were essential for those big royal rituals, they're the ones who created the social blueprint. They divided everyone into 4 distinct groups, or Varnas. Right at the very top, surprise, surprise, were the Brahmins themselves, the guys with all the sacred knowledge. Next up, you had the Kshatriyas. These were the warriors and the rulers. Then came the Vaishyas, so your farmers, herders, and traders. And right at the bottom were the Shudras, whose job it was to serve the other 3 groups. And as you can probably guess, each Varna had a very specific job description. Brahmins, their job was to study and teach the sacred texts, the Vedas, and perform all those important sacrifices. Kshatriyas, which included the king, were in charge of fighting wars and protecting people. The Vaishyas were basically the economic engine of society, the farmers, the traders. And the Shudras, they provided the labor that held the whole thing up. This system literally defined your role in life from the second you were born. So here's the really crucial part. This system became incredibly rigid. Your Varna wasn't about your skills or what you were good at. Nope, it was determined by the family you were born into. You were locked in. And of course, this created some deep, deep inequalities. For example, women and Shudras were usually forbidden from even studying the sacred texts. And this is so important to remember, not everyone just accepted this. Lots of people, even some kings, pushed back and challenged this whole strict hierarchy. Okay, so you've got kings, you've got a new, structured society. What's the next logical step? Well, it's the formation of actual territories with clear borders. We're talking about the birth of the very first states. And these first little kingdoms with territory were called Janapadas. The name literally means the place where the people set their feet down. And that tells you everything. It marks this enormous shift away from a nomadic lifestyle to people settling down in agricultural communities with actual borders, all ruled by one of these new rajas. But you know how these things go. It was only a matter of time. Some of these Janapadas started getting bigger, richer, and a whole lot more powerful than their neighbors. They became these hotspots of wealth and military power, and they started evolving into something much, much bigger. And these were the Mahajanapadas, literally the Great Janapadas. So what made them so great? Well, they had all the things we think of when we think of a state today. We're talking a big fortified capital city, a professional standing army, and, this is key, a system for collecting regular taxes to pay for the whole shebang. Right, so how do you pay for a professional army in giant forts? Taxes, of course. Regular taxes. And the most important tax by far was on crops. Farmers now had to give a fixed piece of their harvest to the king, usually about 1/6 of everything they grew. This tax was called bhaga, and it was basically the financial foundation for these powerful new states. To really get a feel for what one of these Mahajanapadas was actually like, let's zoom in on a case study, the biggest and baddest of them all, the kingdom of Magadha.
Magadha basically hit the jackpot. It was like a perfect storm of advantages. First, location. It was right on the super fertile plains of the Ganga and Son rivers, which meant tons of food and easy transport. Second, forests. These gave them timber for building and, get this, a unique military superweapon, war elephants. Third, resources. It was sitting on top of rich iron ore mines, which meant stronger tools and deadlier weapons. And to top it all off, it was run by a series of really ambitious and frankly ruthless kings who knew exactly how to use every single one of those advantages to crush their rivals.
You can even see its growing power just by looking at where they put their capital. At first, it was a place called Rajagriha, which was great because it was naturally protected by hills. But as the empire got bigger and bigger, they moved the capital to Patalipatra, what we call Patna today. Why? Because it was a strategic powerhouse, controlling all the major river highways in the region.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The rise of these powerful kingdoms like Magadha, that's only half the story. Because right next door, a completely different kind of political experiment was happening. One that basically challenged the whole idea of having one single all-powerful king. I'm talking about the Republic of Vajji, which was known as a gana or a sangha. Now, unlike a monarchy, it wasn't ruled by one person. No way. Instead, power was shared. It was held by a ruling assembly of many leaders. We're talking sometimes thousands of them. And they all got to call themselves Raja, and they all governed together. So just picture this. You've got two totally different systems running side by side. Over in Magadha, you have one guy, the king, calling all the shots. But in Vajji, all the big decisions were made together through discussion and debate in public assemblies. It was a real republic, and it existed at the exact same time as these huge, powerful monarchies.
You know, the strength of this republican model was so clear that even the Buddha commented on it. When someone asked him about Vajji, he basically said that as long as they held their assemblies often, listened to their elders, and acted together, they would be unbeatable. In other words, their real power came from their unity.
And this, right here, is the most crucial takeaway. This whole period wasn't just about kings popping up. It was this incredible era of political experimentation where two totally fundamental ideas of how to run a society, monarchy and republic, rule by one person versus rule by many, were born and were being tested against each other in real time. And that brings us to one last, really big question for you. This whole tension between rule by one and rule by many, something that played out so dramatically thousands of years ago in ancient India, well, isn't that a debate that's still shaping our world right now? I mean, from monarchies to democracies, you can still hear the echoes of Magadha and Vajji today. So how do you think these ancient experiments in power have influenced the way we all live right now? It's definitely something to think about.